Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman live on your radio. Hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use, no doubt, continues now. This is the broadcast for July 28th in the year of our Lord 2025. This is Hour 2 at 2. Promoting God, family, country, protecting life, liberty, and property, rejecting revolution unless it's a Jesus revolution. Then we're in because we follow the Prince of Peace. Lowell Nelson, well-known campaignforliberty.org, RonPaulInstitute.org advocate. I support them 1,000%. Lowell, welcome back, sir. Hope you had a fantastic weekend.
Good to be back. Sam, thank you for the opportunity. We had a family reunion in Wyoming over the weekend.
Wow, we had one in Moab over the weekend.
It was a lot of fun. I hope you had as much fun as we did. It was a great time we had together.
We had an absolute blast. And let me tell you a quick personal story if we're talking about reunions. Maybe
Sure.
You can tell me the favorite highlight of your reunion. I'll tell you the favorite highlight of my reunion. So there's this concept where you get a rope. Let's say that it's really long.
Mm-hmm.
And you have every member in the family then get a number, and their numbers based on when they joined the family.
Mm-hmm.
So just take my wife's family. There's mom and dad. Then there's 6 children. So that's number 8. Well, I joined the family first. I was the first in-law, so I'm number 9. And then if somebody had a baby, like my daughter would be number 10, etc. And you go through the whole family, and we basically documented 72 children and grandchildren, etc., of this couple, and we documented by everybody joined on the rope, and the rope is meant to bind us together, is the symbolism, and we basically documented 72 people as a result of my wife's parents and their earthly lives and their willingness to have children and da-da-da-da-da, and it was very, very spiritual because it really brought together that everybody's valuable, everybody's important. And normally you don't want your name turned into a number, but it's the time when you added a contribution to the family, when you added your soul, your spirit, your heart, your love, your forgiveness, your all the things that it takes to become part of a family, when you joined us and these numbers. And so it's fascinating how we all fit in and kind of learning when people join the family. And even though you knew it at the time, you forget it 10, 20, 30, whatever years later, but you kind of go back and go, wow. What an opportunity for us to become this huge family. Little kids were all excited when their name was called. They'd come up and they'd be excited to get involved and be with the family. And there were several people that weren't there for different reasons, but they were represented. And anyway, it was a very cool, in my opinion, turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the fathers, kind of a moment where we really think about who we are and what we're part of and what our contributions are. And anyway, it was one of my favorite parts of our reunion.
That is so cool. I love the idea. Favorite part of our reunion was a little more mundane, but nevertheless, we had a what do you call those things? Not a quad runner. It's side-by-side. And so one of my sons-in-law brought a side-by-side, and of course there's a whole bunch of them there, but he has a lot of patience, right? And so all of the children, the younger children, they wanted to drive the side-by-side, even little 3-year-old Wes, right? He wanted to drive that side-by-side. And so for the littles, they would just steer, and of course my son-in-law would do the pedals and, make sure that they were staying on the track or whatever. But we had grandchildren all the way from 3-year-olds up to 13-year-olds, and they all wanted to turn, driving the side-by-side. And some of them actually drove it, the older ones, and it was just around the little area. We're way up in the mountains and heavily wooded with a river on one side and a road on the other side and a lot of trees in between and a lot of open space. But for 2 hours, Sam, that side-by-side went round and round and round and round, and all the grandchildren, they got to 1 or 2 turns to drive the side-by-side. It was a real hit, and just something very, very simple, but boy, it just really went a long way. It was a ton of fun. just one of the activities.
It brings people together. It lets people realize that everyone is a contributor, everyone is unique, and everyone participates, and everyone is welcome. And hey, even if you don't have a traditional family, you can create family reunions with loved ones and neighbors, and that's what they talk about, godmothers and godfathers, and people make families out of situations that aren't perfect all the time. And it's tremendous when people do that. Anyway, we just wanted to give you some personal experiences. We talk about God, family, and country all the time, so we want you all to know when we talk about this stuff, it's real. It's who we are. It's what we do with our time when no one's looking, and we're the same in public as we are in private. All right, Ron, go ahead,
sir. One other thing I'll throw in there, Sam, you're talking about, appreciation to our Creator for our lives and our, the various talents and experiences that we have. One of my nephews in-law was undoing a hitch or something on his fifth-wheel trailer. And this is before we got there, the night before we got there, in fact. But he was there, and he was unhitching something or other, and something broke loose, and this piece of iron just came up and slammed him in the mouth. It turned out that he had blood everywhere, but he had to go down and get stitches. There was basically a hole in his lower lip, and he had to have like 5 stitches on the inside and 6 on the outside, or vice versa, something like that. But when you think about it, he was really lucky, right? I mean, blessed might be another word for that, because it could have been so much worse, right? He could have knocked his head off. It could have broken teeth. It could have, damaged the skull. Anyway, he came out of that with
gone into his brain. Who knows, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was. We're happy, just lucky to he's still alive and kicking, So we appreciate our Heavenly Father and the way He keeps protecting us, takes good care of us, Sam.
Couldn't agree more. Again, folks, it is about God, family, and country, just like we tell you. Ron Paul wrote an incredible article this week that I want to focus on. When you hear the title, you kind of think, what on earth? Is this a contradiction in terms? No, you got to understand it. The headline is America's Syrian Civil War. Ron Paul. And he really breaks this down, and you think, what do you mean civil war? A civil war usually is internal. If it's Syrians' civil war, it'll be internal to Syria. Problem is, we can't keep our hands out of anybody's business, Lowell.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the case, and we don't hear much about Syria very often, but apparently it has descended into mayhem and violence. He writes this: as Syria descends into full-scale civil war with more than 1,000 people killed in just the last few days, it may be a good time to remember that phrase, Assad must go, right? Everybody was saying, Assad must go. Assad's a bad guy. Assad must go. That was the slogan that regime changers rolled out some 14 years ago. So that's like 2011 or so. Anyway, during the Arab Spring that was supposed to usher liberal democracies into power throughout the region. Well, he writes this: from Tunisia to Egypt to Libya and on to Syria, the plan was to remake the Middle East according to the will of Washington's master planners. The State Department, the media, the Pentagon, and the think tanks fed by the military-industrial congressional complex were all enthusiastically on board the program because making war and overthrowing governments is their bread and butter. If the United States pursued a foreign policy of non-interventionism as laid out by the founders, this massive national security state would cease to exist. We would return to being a republic, and they would have to return to honest work. That's probably the most important statement in the whole column, Sam. This idea, it comes from the very founders, the framers, this policy of non-interventionism, right, laid out by our founders. That would make such a big difference in today's world if the United States would return to that beautiful and non-interventionist foreign policy. Instead, he writes, a determined effort that took nearly 14 years finally produced the regime change in Syria last December that the neocons wanted. Assad did finally go actually to exile in Russia, but as always the case with U.S.-directed regime change, his replacement was even worse. The new, unelected regime has slaughtered Alawites and Christians from nearly day one, and the last week turned its guns on the Druze minority. I'm not sure how you say Druze, but it's Druze. So it's just another, cultural minority over there in Syria, the Druze minority. A country of many different faiths and ethnic groups has been ripped apart, and probably for good. So basically, Sam, you've got all of these different groups of people in Syria. They were living together peaceably until last December, when someone other than Assad came to power. Sam?
Hang tight, more in seconds. You're listening to Lowell Nelson, campaignforliberty.org, right here on Liberty Roundtable Live.
In the medical field, IT security is crucial. Our highly skilled consultants are HIPAA certified and have 20-plus years of experience servicing medical clinics, billing, and supply companies. We offer comprehensive endpoint protection, guarding your computers and servers against all stages of threats. And with our 24/7 monitoring services, you'll never worry about extensive downtime again. Ready to level up your IT support? Call 801-706-6980 today and discover how great IT services can be with managed IT services.
Experience the untamed spirit of the American West with Range Magazine. Each issue is a visual journey featuring award-winning photography and compelling stories that capture the heart of ranching and rural life. Stay informed on the challenges and triumphs of those who live and work on the land. Subscribe today and receive quarterly editions delivered to your doorstep, and join a community that cherishes the enduring legacy of the Western frontier. Visit rangemagazine.com to subscribe.
As the United States boldly stepped forward in the glorious light provided by its new Constitution in 1787, the nations of the earth were in awe of the newfound strength and hope of this free land. Today, the nation stands at a crossroads. A divergence from the original intent put forth in the United States Constitution has brought grave threats to our beloved nation. A miracle is needed if the United States is to survive. That miracle is again the pure application of the United States Constitution. I'm Scott Bradley. In my To Preserve the Nation book and lecture series, I bring forth truths that will help raise up a new generation of statesmen like those noble Americans who founded this land. Vigorous application of these principles will invigorate and restore the nation, and we may become again the freest, most prosperous, most respected, and happiest nation on earth. Visit topreservethenation.com to begin that restoration.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Lowell Nelson. I'm riding shotgun this morning with your host at Liberty Roundtable Live, Sam Bushman, talking about this awesome column by Ron Paul about Syria's civil war that is really America's Syria's civil war, because we're smack in the middle of it. We wanted regime change in Syria. Everybody wanted Assad to go. I mean, all the big playmakers, the armament manufacturing, the military-industrial congressional complex, that's that way they make a ton of money, right, with war, and so they wanted war in Syria. They wanted Assad gone. Well, he was exiled to Russia, and his replacement was much worse. I must say a little bit more about Assad, though. During his rule, which is well over a decade, 15, 20 years there, in Syria, he allowed Christians to worship Christ. He allowed the Muslim faith to worship the way they chose. There was relative peace in Syria all this time until, last December when Assad left, when he got kicked out of power. That's when everything that Ron Paul's talking about this in this column came to pass. He writes this: Syria's descent into mayhem and violence is another tragic reminder that Washington's neocons are very good at undermining and overthrowing governments abroad that refuse to play ball according to D.C. rules. But when it comes to actually bringing anything of value from the chaos they create, they are hopelessly incompetent. In Syria, the damage is done, and future generations will continue to suffer from the cruel folly of those convinced they know how to run everybody else's lives. End of quote. Boy, Ron Paul, he says so much in in such easy, simple sentences, but that's really what happened. We have destroyed the peace that was in Syria for over a decade because of our meddling and our persistence in getting rid of Assad there in Syria. It's a horrible
and let's
situation.
make it clear. Let's make it clear. We're not at all defending Mossad. We're not saying it was great. What we're saying is it was better than it is now. And why do we think we have to be the regime change agents? Why do we believe we have to be involved in breaching these sovereign nations? And so I'm not here to defend or, attack any worldwide leader or leader of a specific country or whatever. I'm just here to say who gave us godlike power to decide we're in the authority seat, or we're the decision maker, or we can breach the sovereignty of anybody we want, or we can meddle in these affairs or those affairs. And the blowback principle Ron Paul talked about and the CIA has documented is really vital to understand. Now, whether it'll be blowback today or tomorrow, who knows? But I would say this, though. The enabling ability for us to even play world's policeman or top dog or whatever you want to call it is because we have dishonest money, Lowell. If we were chained down by the Constitution and we're only using honest weights and measures, constitutional currency, gold and silver, and we jettisoned this unconstitutional Federal Reserve backed by, in my opinion, it's a banking cartel backed by, weapons and war and everything else. And the best way to stop these unconstitutional wars and us meddling in the affairs of all these nations, the best way to bring us back to a humble foreign policy would be to defund the money changers, to go back to honest money and chain them down. If we didn't have all this money, if we were forced to use honest money, gold and silver, we wouldn't be in all these conflicts at all, Lowell. We just we wouldn't have the ability to.
Right as rain, Sam. I totally agree with you, and for that reason, that's why I've been, one of the reasons, I guess, that I've been so adamant about returning to sound, honest money. Because the general government only got their gold and silver from tariffs. Like in the beginning, right? They got their gold and silver from tariffs, which were very minor, very low, and then of course the states would remit to the general government a certain amount of taxes depending on their apportionment in the House, right? So if they were apportioned like California, New York with a bunch of people, their tax was higher, right? And it only made sense. But that's the way we started out as a country, as a republic, and there were, in other words, it would be, and because of that, our government was very small, minuscule compared to today's government, almost unnoticeable because it was so small, and so it didn't have a lot of money, and therefore it would not have gone to war, would not have become the world's policeman. Just like you say, Sam, this would be such a blessing if we would return to sound, honest money and not spend money that we don't have, not be able to print money, not be able to create it out of thin air. It would make such a big difference for peace in the world that we live in, Sam.
We can always hope and pray, ladies and gentlemen, advocate. We follow the Prince of Peace and we want peace. You had an interesting question to discuss related to this as well, Lowell.
I did, Sam. I asked a Utah member of the U.S. House, why did he vote against this amendment that Marjorie Taylor Greene offered a week ago last Friday? So it wasn't last Friday, the 25th, but on the 18th, I believe that's a Friday. Anyway, right around that point, Marjorie Taylor Greene offered this amendment. Her amendment, it was an amendment to the Defense Appropriations Act. This amendment would have eliminated like $500 million in military aid to Israel. Maybe it was $500,000. I can't remember. It was a big number anyway. Why not eliminate that from the military aid to Israel? In fact, I asked him, where in the Constitution did the states vest in the general government authority to give money to other nations? Right? Because I've never read it in there. And so this is his response, Sam. I just really need your your perspective on this. He said that providing for the common defense was the constitutional authority for our giving money to Israel to defend herself against Iran, right? That's basically what he said. I was paraphrasing, but it's basically what he said. In other words, if the U.S. would bomb Iran, then Iran will not be able to hurt us here. That's the logic, I think, that goes along with his statement. How would you have responded to that, Sam?
Well, I look at it this way, and I say, hey, we need these kind of amendments from Green. I would have voted for it, not against the amendment, because I believe that we need to cut this money. We need to reduce spending. If there's any way, ladies and gentlemen, to reduce governments meddling in the affairs of other nations, violating sovereignty, playing the world's police, whatever term you want to use for it, or whether it's even domestic, funding things they ought to not fund or they don't have authority to fund, meddling in the affairs of people, foreign and domestic, it's got to stop. And the only way to stop it is to reduce government expenditures, reduce the footprint of government, let people go, create a small, nimble government that carries out its constitutional mandate, nothing more, nothing less. So that's the summation. I would have gone against this representative that you're speaking of. And this representative, in my opinion, mixes things up. And let me explain what I mean. They say, we got to have defense. We got this defense capability in the United States, and that kind of trumps everything. Based on that defense doctrine, we can do whatever we want to. And my response is there's a big distinguishing line through defense versus offense. And it's very easy to know when you cross that line. When you're offense, you're basically in their lands, involved in their, quote, civil war, for instance. Mm-hmm. Well, they only have a civil war because we're involved probably, but that's another topic. Why are we building a massive supply chain and we're over there, but we claim it's for defense? See, defense, folks, and offense are completely different. Just look at a basketball game or a football game to make the point. Defense says you're trying to stop them from doing something that's bad. Or in this case, that's bad for your team, which is don't let them score any other points. But you're not going on the offense, okay? You're not running the ball. You're not, okay? And we need to think defensive when it comes to war for America. Hey, if someone is trying to attack us, I get our defense, for sure. But when we're in their lands, involved in their civil war, and we're basically funding and training and arming these kinds of people, you can't tell me it's defensive in nature. It's a lie. It's offensive in nature. That's why this great column is entitled by Ron Paul, what is it, America's Syrian Civil War? Mm-hmm. What the heck is Americans' Syrian Civil War mean? What does that even mean? Well, it means America's involved in this civil war. Why are we even involved? How is that defensive? How does that protect America? How does that? And so I would basically, push back on the congressperson that you speak of and say, where is this defensive mechanism? Even if you were to say that has Trump, pardon the pun, ability to let us do whatever we want to, which I don't believe that's true. But even so, where do you get this offensive action by us in a defensive measure? I mean, Trump was literally on the phone going, hey, what if we were to go ahead and punch missiles way deep into Russia? Do you think you could do that? That is not a defensive move, people. It's incredibly offensive. Now, I know I switched from one war to another, but my point remains the same. If we're really in defense, what defense does America need? And can it be done on honest money? And if it can, then you're starting to obey the rules of the supreme law of our land, and you get my support. Until then, I'm saying, hey, let's return to the supreme law of the land. It has incredible guidelines and checks and balances and delegated authorities, etc. And it's designed to chain people down and stop these kind of shenanigans. Thank heavens for the supreme law. It is the solution. Lowell Nelson continues in seconds on your radio.
Exposing corruption, informing citizens, pursuing liberty. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
News this hour from townhall.com. I'm Rich Thomason. President Trump is significantly shortening the 50-day deadline he gave Russia's Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine.
I'm going to make a new deadline of about 10 or 12 days from today. There's no reason in waiting. There's no reason in waiting. It's 50 days. I want to be generous, but we just don't see any progress being made.
Ukraine's Air Force says Russia fired another overnight barrage at Ukraine. Mr. Trump has threatened Russia with severe tariffs unless a peace deal is reached. The president's announcing a trade deal with the European Union. He says the agreement imposes a 15% tariff on goods imported from the EU, and the Europeans will no longer have to buy so much oil and natural gas from Russia.
The European Union is going to agree to purchase from the United States $750 billion worth of energy. $750 billion worth of energy. They are going to agree to invest into the United States $600 billion more than they're investing already.
And the president says Europe will also buy a lot of military hardware from the U.S. Police in Traverse City, Michigan, holding a suspect. The weekend knife attack at a Walmart store. The suspect will face terrorism and other charges. Bystanders, one of them armed, collared the suspect until police could arrive. Watching Wall Street this hour, the Dow is down 21 points. The Nasdaq trading 58 points higher, and the S&P is up 5 points. More on these stories at townhall.com.
A couple years ago, I was in the bathroom at the airport when I dropped my smartphone in the toilet. Not smart. I was multitasking when I should have been focused on the job at hand. Embarrassing, but I'm not alone. According to Google, 7 million other multitaskers accidentally dropped their phones into the bowl last year. A gentle reminder that right now you can get yourself a brand new Samsung Galaxy A36 absolutely free with a $35 plan from Pure Talk. The A36 comes with scratch-resistant Gorilla Glass and a battery that'll last all day, along with unlimited talk, text, and data on America's most dependable 5G network. In other words, it's tough and smart. Something to think about next time you're multitasking in the necessary. Just dial pound 250, say keyword micro to get your free phone today. You can make the switch in just 10 minutes. That's pound 250. Say micro to switch to a no-nonsense smartphone and a company that actually stands for something. Pure Talk.
Why don't we say to the government writ large that they have to spend a little bit less? Anybody ever had less money this year than you had last? Anybody ever having a 1% pay cut? You deal with it. That's what government needs, a 1% pay cut. If you take a 1% pay cut across the board, you have more than enough money to actually pay for the disaster relief. But nobody's going to do that because they're fiscally irresponsible. Who are they? Republicans. Who are they? Democrats. Who are they? Virtually the whole body is careless and reckless with your money. So the money will not be offset by cuts anywhere. The money will be added to the debt, and there will be a day of reckoning. What's the day of reckoning? The day of reckoning may well be the collapse of the stock market. The day of reckoning may be the collapse of the dollar. When it comes, I can't tell you exactly, but I can tell you it has happened repeatedly in history when countries ruin their currency.
Are you ready to stand up for your community and support your local sheriff? Join the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association and become a vital member of the Sheriff's Citizens Posse. At cspoa.org, we empower citizens like you through weekly webinars, arming you with the knowledge to back your constitutional county sheriff. Together, we can uphold our Constitution and ensure liberty and justice for all. Your community needs you now more than ever.
This is a battle between truth and deceit. A battle between forces that would enslave this country in darkness and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in fact.
TheEpochTimes.com.
Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the second hour of Liberty RoundTable this morning. I'm Lowell Nelson, riding shotgun with your host, Sam Bushman, this morning. And another great column by Andrew Napolitano talking about enforcing the laws faithfully. That's what we expect of our president. Well, turns out the IRS announced a couple weeks ago it would not enforce a certain section of federal law commonly known as the Johnson Amendment, right? This Johnson Amendment was named for its author, Lyndon B. Johnson. Basically, it strikes a bargain with charities. If you accept tax-free dollars, then you got to stay out of politics. This amendment is a federal law codified in IRS code at 501c3. Everybody hears that term all the time. Anyway, it permits the IRS to grant tax-exempt status to qualifying charities. Tax exemptions generally permit charity to solicit and accept financial contributions using pre-tax dollars and relieves them from paying taxes on the income collected thereby. In return, the charity agrees to refrain from engaging in or financing partisan politics. Very interesting. Well, that brings us to a question Judge Andrew Napolitano asks in this very thoughtful column. Obviously, the drafters of the Constitution provided for a separation of powers, right? Basically, Congress, they write the laws, the president and those he hires, they enforce the laws, and the Judiciary decides what the laws mean and whether they comport with the Constitution, right? Well, Andrew Napolitano writes this, quote, "The flip side of the separation of powers is twofold. First, the separation prohibits any of the three branches from performing the core duties of either of the other two, whether by stealth, force, or even permission. Core duties are those articulated in the Constitution or unambiguously derived from it. Thus, only Congress can impose taxes, as that core duty is assigned to it by the Constitution. This is essentially the reason that President Donald Trump's tariffs have been found unconstitutional, because a tariff is a tax and only Congress can impose taxes." I'm just interjecting here, Sam, another violation of this concept of separation of powers is the Congress is supposedly giving President authority to make war, right? Authorization of the use of military force, the AUMF. That is unconstitutional for Congress to do that, because only Congress can declare war on some other country. And
one interesting tidbit related to this, Lowell, and I wanted to wait till the Andrew Napolitano article was discussed because I think it relates, but tying this back to the Ron Paul article as well. This congressman says, in our defensive mode, we can do anything we want to. Well, I mentioned that that's offense. And one of the ways that you know when government's acting offensively, when they're supposed to be acting defensively, is that they have to violate their own rules or laws or delegations of authority and power in order to do that. And so, for example, Judge Napolitano is talking about, hey, Congress is the only one. Okay, the separation prohibits all three branches from doing what the others are delegated to do. All right, whether it's by stealth or permission or whatever else. So the second flip side of this separation is this assumption that each branch will, in fact, do what the Constitution charges it to do. Congress will write the laws. The president will enforce the laws, and as they are written, not as he wants, but as they are written. And then the courts will interpret them appropriately. Okay, whenever you have a situation that, as far as I can see, Lowell, where they want to do something, it's offensive when they're doing things out of order. They violate the checks and balances. They violate the rule of law. They violate their delegated authority or their permission granted by we the people every time. Every time we go on the offensive and violate our, quote, defensive nature, it's the only way they can do that is when they violate certain checks and balances or laws or rules. Every time you can see it, Lowell.
Yeah, I think that's a very good observation, Sam. They color outside the lines nearly all of the time nowadays, folks, and so they're almost always doing something they should not be doing. And that's why we need a stronger chorus of citizens pounding on their representatives to do the right thing and helping them do the right thing. If more of us would get involved that way, then perhaps we'd make a difference. There have been turnarounds in Congress. I'm trying to think of the name of. There was a congressman who from somewhere in the deep South. He's no longer. I think he passed away now, but he voted for war one time, and then he changed his position, and thereafter he always voted against war, and he also wrote a personal note to the family of a serviceman whose life was lost, in some foreign conflict, and so these congressmen can turn around. They can change their mind. They change their position if they get enough, input from their constituency. Well, back to the column, Andrew Napolitano is talking about selective enforcement, essentially, is what this column talks about. And then he goes back to Philadelphia at the convention in the summer of 1787 to remind us of what the framers thought about this selective enforcement. Well, he writes this, quote, Madison feared presidents being disingenuous and effectively doing whatever they wanted to do with federal laws. He knew, speaking of James Madison, he knew that presidents would be tempted to pick and choose which laws to enforce and which to disregard. He warned against the selective enforcement of federal statutes, the effect of which is to nullify federal laws for certain persons. In order to prevent this, he insisted that the presidential oath of office be included in the Constitution and that all presidents swear in the oath to enforce the laws faithfully. No such requirement of faithfulness is textually imposed upon the Congress or the courts. End of quote. Now, I thought that was an interesting observation, Sam. I didn't realize that. I knew that the oath was in the Constitution, but the one that president takes is slightly different because he swears an oath to enforce the laws faithfully. Very interesting. And I might add here, Sam.
And let's be clear. This is what I mean by defense versus offense. Mm-hmm. If he does honor the laws faithfully, then he must honor that Congress is responsible to decide to go to war or not, and or fund that war, and to define the reasons we're there and what we hope to accomplish if justified. Mm-hmm. If the president doesn't allow that to take place properly, he wants to move unilaterally. See, that's offensive. Mm-hmm. Okay? Think of an offensive foul, folks. You just ran over the defense of your own government in an attempt to supposedly stand for peace? I don't think so. That's not the peaceful way to do it, to just charge against your own government. And that's what happens when you disobey the laws and you go from offense or defense to offense. Lowell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that, Sam. And the point that I want to make here is that if you're going to enforce the laws faithfully, then you do so with fidelity to the original intent of the framers and the ratifiers of this Constitution. And so if Congress passes an unconstitutional law, such as the AUMF, then you as a president, you should nullify that law by refusing to enforce it, right? I mean, that would be a faithful enforcement of the Constitution. That's what you take an oath to uphold, is the Constitution of the states, not the laws of Congress. Nowhere in the oath do you swear an oath to uphold the laws of Congress. You swear an oath to uphold the Constitution and defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's your oath. And so if Congress passes an unconstitutional law, then you're duty bound to nullify that law if you're the president, if you're in the executive branch of government, right? And if you're a state, you have a duty, not only a right but a duty, to nullify any unconstitutional law that Congress comes up with. So that's also, I think, encompassed in this idea of enforcing the laws faithfully, Sam. I hope that's not too far afield of what Judge Napolitano is saying here. And so basically, just summarizing the column, is we're witnessing an erosion of democracy when the executive branch can be unfaithful about enforcing laws. And so what we really need, folks, is an executive, a chief executive, who will faithfully execute the laws. Sam?
Liberty Roundtable Live continues in seconds.
Attention collectors and savvy investors. We are excited to announce a momentous evolution in our journey. Introducing Free Water Coin Company, formerly known as Rust Coin and Gift. This rebranding takes us back to the very roots of where it all began. Free Water, Oregon. It's a tribute to the legacy of Al Rust and a celebration of 3 generations of dedication to excellence in the world of coins and precious gifts. Al, Brian, and Jake Rust standing strong through 64 years of service. Discover a world of exceptional service at Free Water Coin Company, your premier destination for genuine, honest money and precious gifts. Under Brian's expert guidance, Free Water Coin Company, building on the legacy of Rust Coin and Gift, continues its tradition of trust and excellence. Visit us at our Provo, Utah location. Explore our treasures online at freewatercoinco.com or call us at 801-377-1574. Free Water Coin Company, where your future is built one honest coin at a time.
Looking for an IT partner that truly understands your needs? Managed IT Services is the answer. We meet with you regularly to discuss your goals and form a tailored technology plan. Our customers have called us a trusted advisor who delivers. When it comes to IT, we do it all. Firewalls, cloud storage, server migration, and more. Say goodbye to long-term contracts and hello to a team that earns your business month after month. Call 801-706-6980 now and let Managed IT Services transform your IT experience.
Have you ever had great honey? No, I mean really good, all-natural, raw honey? Well, now you can, thanks to localhoneyman.com. We can ship out our locally made honey all across the U.S. So don't worry, you won't miss out. Plus, Local Honeyman has so many different flavors, like Utah Wildflower, High Desert Delight, Happy Valley, and Blackberry, just to name a few. So purchase your delicious raw honey today at localhoneyman.com.
All right, back with you live, ladies and gentlemen. Over at LouRockwell.com, there's an incredible column written by John J. Duncan Jr. And the column talks about Gaza children. And basically it says this: at least heaven has food. Folks, this is a tragic situation. I get it. But it's not time for governments to promote war. The real question you got to ask before we start this column, Lowell, in my humble opinion, why are these people all without food? Why are these people in such a war-torn reality? Let's not pretend we're benevolent and we're just going to, parachute in food everywhere. Donald Trump's all over the news going, yeah, we're sending food and we're this great people. Government's on the offensive again. They're not defensive. Government has no authority to take my groceries and give them to people around the world. Let's start there, Lowell.
Yeah, great place to start, Sam, because government is intervening where they have no license to, no warrant to intervene. The people of Gaza, this is a genocide, folks, a real, live, ongoing genocide. People are being starved, even though there's tons of food, clean water, medical supplies, and shelter items, and fuel even that sit untouched, with humanitarian organizations blocked from accessing it or delivering it. And even when some of the people of Gaza go to these humanitarian aid stations to get food, while they're waiting in line, they get killed. It's just sickening. I don't know how to describe more horrific situation. People are starving to death over there. Senator Ted Cruz was talking to Tucker Carlson on a podcast, and Tucker asked him where it says in the Bible that, we're to bless Israel. And so Cruz didn't know. He got really flustered. He couldn't answer. And then Representative Duncan makes a very important point. Quote, "The Bible instructs people to bless Israel. It does not say people should bless Israel's government or agree with everything it does. Hundreds of thousands of Jews, possibly a few million around the world, do not support what the Israeli government is doing in Gaza." End of quote. And so, for similarly, folks, people in any of the states, we can love our country and yet still criticize our government, right? There's a big difference between the United States government and the people of the United States. A huge difference. We have a government that's out of control, intervening in foreign countries all over the place, and yet 95% of the people do not approve. Maybe it's not that. I don't know how many people. I don't even know if they do a poll like that. We don't like our government intervening.
When you look at the propaganda people are under. Like right now, they're like, hey, Donald Trump is trying to help out. He's bringing a bunch of food to starving people. See, it sounds good on the surface. Yeah. Until you understand the proper role of limited government, until you understand that we never delegated authority to the federal government to ship food around the world. Okay, that's just not an authorized responsibility. So is it a nice, kind gesture? Yes, it is. But it's wrongfully done when we enable government to do what it was never authorized to do. Now, if Donald Trump wants to say, hey, these people are starving, I personally have put in $10 million. I've started a GoFundMe or whatever else with like private sector groups, people, philanthropists, churches would like everybody to help. Hey, by all means, a worthy cause that I'd contribute to. But when you want to stand up and put government at that position, you've now crossed the line from defensive to offensive without authority in doing so. And so that's the problem that we have. We get the suffering, but you got to back up and say, how did this suffering, why is this suffering happening? Because we created a war-torn zone by our involvement for decades. Well, that's why. Let's be clear of the cause, shall we?
Yes, we shall. And now we get to the reason this column was labeled "At Least Heaven Has Food." There's an aid worker there spoke of the devastating impact on children. Turns out that over there, children tell their parents they want to go to heaven because at least heaven has food. Now, if that doesn't tug at your heartstrings, Sam, I don't know what does. Because, children who want to die because they are so hungry, they'd rather die than starve. That's how
tragic but true, and there's answers in the private sector, ladies and gentlemen. Just talk to the Christians if you don't believe me. All right, get ready for a big foreign crisis, writes Jacob G. Hornberger over at LouRockwell.com. I pray he's wrong. Predict he's right, Lowell.
Yeah, I think so, Sam. The centerpiece of this column, we'll get right to the heart of it. He quotes James Madison, the father of the Constitution, who wrote this: "The means of defense against foreign danger have been always the instruments of tyranny at home. Among the Romans, it was a standing maxim to excite a war whenever a revolt was apprehended." That is the centerpiece, and that's what's happening today, folks. I mean, these tricks that the tyrants play on us they play them over and over again. So listen to this. The means of defense against foreign danger have been always the instruments of tyranny at home, right? The big boogeyman out there is why we have tyranny at home. So what he was saying there really is that, in the old Roman Empire, occasionally the population would rebel and, against the taxation and monetary debasement, right? And whenever that would happen, the Roman emperor would simply start a war against some foreign entity, some scary boogeyman. And that would stir up enough fear and patriotism within the population that they would then succumb to the taxation and the tyranny at home because they wanted to be safe. Well, that's what is happening today, and it goes on today. And so what's the big distraction nowadays? Is it the Jeffrey Epstein client list that we're told does not exist, right? Is, what could be the next big thing going on? Well, Jacob G. Hornberger says one thing is certain, quote, given the fact that Epstein obviously had very wealthy and very powerful clients, and more important, given the very real likelihood that Epstein had connections to either Israeli or U.S. intelligence or both, there is no reasonable possibility that Trump is going to order the release of all the federal investigative files in the Epstein case. Will his MAGA supporters simply accept the inevitable and give up? Well, if they don't, then everyone should prepare himself for the prospect of a big foreign crisis in the near future. End of quote.
And
Sam?
I pray that's wrong, but predict that's true because we've seen false flags in the past from our own government. We've seen this stuff happen, and we know history repeats itself. Right now, though, they're kind of trying to shift the discussion from Jeffrey Epstein to Barack Obama, believe it or not, though, Lowell. That's their first attempt.
Yeah, and that might be the whole reason that this information on Obama is coming out. But this last article written by J.B. Shurk, who I don't know, but he writes for a reputable group, apparently. Anyway, Tulsi Gabbard set off the fireworks on Friday, about 10 days ago, when she accused former President Barack Obama of organizing a coup d'etat against his successor. Summarizing the damning evidence in her possession, Gabbard concluded, quote, "These documents detail a treasonous conspiracy by officials at the highest levels of the Obama White House to subvert the will of the American people," end of quote. Now, General Michael Flynn said this, Sam. This is why Gabbard was attacked so relentlessly over the past few weeks and months. They knew if there were anyone with the guts to investigate the attempted coup, it would be her. I thought that was quite a statement coming from General Flynn. I've met and talked with General Flynn, by the way, on several occasions. He is a wonderful gentleman. Have you visited with him ever, Sam? Talked with him?
I have not, Lowell.
Yeah, just a wonderful gentleman. I cannot say enough about him. I really like him, and if he was taken out because he had the guts to do what Gabbard is now doing, but he got sabotaged way early in his post there with the Trump, first time Trump was in. But Gabbard, she didn't waste any time. She just took it to him. But it might be just a way to distract the public from the Epstein client list. Who knows? But anyway, so...
Well, I will say this. We want defensive, proper role of limited government. Use the Constitution to chain them down. The checks and balances are vital, ladies and gentlemen. We need to return to honest money. 90% of the shenanigans that we discuss and the government overreach and the government spending too much money or the government doing this or that makes everybody just cringe or abhorrent behavior or whatever, almost every bit of it can be traced back to, hey, you got a dishonest money system. And if you have dishonesty at the core of every transaction, and many of them are honest transactions because you and I don't have control. So just because I spend $1 that's a Federal Reserve note, it doesn't mean I'm dishonest. But there is dishonesty at every transaction because of this. And until you get that honest in your weights and measures and honest in your medium of exchange, you're going to have trouble. And so if you want to nip this in the bud, you want to make a difference, I appreciate all that Donald's doing, but he's merely, dealing with the fringes, dealing with around the edge. Let's shut down the Federal Reserve and get to the heart of this and reject war unless it's defensive to protect the United States of America. If there's great ethical issues around the world like feeding those who are suffering and don't have food, let the private sector take care of it. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and 10 celebrities could provide the lead seed fund and we could all participate. There's ways to solve this. Think about Christians. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And that's where it starts, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Lowell Nelson, campaignforliberty.org. This is Solutions Radio, sir.